Just wanted to take a minute, and as we're starting to wrap up, let- uh, we've been talking about love. Let's talk about ethics. Let's talk about what is it to be like an excellent person. The Greek philosopher Aristotle defined living a moral life as living a life of excellence, living a good life. And I think that includes love, but let's talk about it for a second. So, Aristotle believed that living a good life is living a life that is balanced. So he believed that there were ways that you could be too good of a person, and that made you a bad person. So if you were too generous with your money, you fell into a problem where you couldn't take care of yourself. So that's an issue. But if you hoard your money and you're not generous at all, then you're not helping other people out. And that's also a problem. So you need to have that balance where like you're charitable, but you're not too charitable, where you help people, but you don't help people too much, because you probably know that one person who kind of bends over backwards for everyone and tries to do everything for everyone and doesn't really have any time to do anything for themselves, can't take care of themselves, doesn't know kind of who they are. I heard one mother say when her kids all moved out, like, I don't know who I am. I was a mother. That's it. That's all I did was take care of the kids. Now that the kids are gone out of the house, zero idea who I am, what to do. Right? You need that balance, otherwise you lose part of your life. Um, you can be too truthful for Aristotle. You shouldn't lie all the time, then you're not trustworthy. But you should probably lie sometimes. There's some times where it makes sense to lie. um, Stretch the truth, kind of change things up to not hurt someone's feelings, to protect someone, makes sense to for Aristotle to be a little dishonest every once in a while, right? Not too honest. And this would include also when someone asks you a question, not oversharing that, right? Even though it's true, you don't need to know everything, right? When someone calls and asks, "How was your day? What'd you do?" You're not really lying when you say that, well, I didn't do that much today, or I just went to work, instead of saying, well, okay, at this time I got up, I did this, I did this, I did that, right? Like, we get it. Also, for Aristotle, you can be like too courageous. Being courageous is a good thing, but courage for Aristotle is protecting yourself, knowing when to fight and when to run. So a soldier should be courageous, but not foolhardy. So the example I try to bring out for everyone is like, let's say you're on your way home today or tomorrow, and you walk past a burning house, and there is a lady outside who is screaming, "My baby, my baby!" It's on the third floor. What's the house is fairly engulfed. Like, you could probably get in somewhat safely, but it it's more than a the trash can's on fire in the basement, and it's less than like a complete raging inferno. But like, it's the courageous thing to do. Is it for you to jump through the door or window and rush up the stairs and grab the kid and run outside? Like, I know that like that sounds cool, but like if I tried to do that, it would just mean that the firefighters, when they get there, have another person to rescue inside. It's just not going to happen. So we need to recognize like that's foolish. That's foolhardy for me to try to do something like that. If I see a bunch of people fighting or if someone wants to fight me, I'm not a fighter. It's a lot of people would say that it's not courageous to run away, but like it's self-preservation. In Aristotle, that would be courageous. Now, he'd also say it wouldn't be courageous if you're like a trained firefighter and you got all your gear and you show up to the fire to not go in and fight the fire. Because you have the knowledge, you have the preservation, you have the like stuff, the skills, the equipment to fight the fire. But it still takes a little bit of that like heart, that willpower to go in, that courage to go in and fight that fire. So you need to do that. You need to like have that mixture of like, yeah, I'm not going to be crazy. Like there was the guy in World War II who stormed the beaches of Normandy wearing a kilt, carrying a broadsword while playing the bagpipes. And he made it, but like that's stupid. I mean, it sounds really cool, and I'd totally watch a movie based on this guy's life, but like, that's stupid. He should have died. He shouldn't have done that. I just think that the Germans are like, what's that guy doing? Like, and just didn't even shoot at him. It's just like, that's silly. Doing something more like, even if you are really, I don't know, if you're a cop on duty and you show up to a riot, right, and it's just you, right, courage. Wait for backup. Don't run in. Don't be too courageous and think, well, I can take care of this all by myself. Does that make sense? Like for all of the virtues for Aristotle, you can be too much, you can have too much of them, or you can have too little of them. So you need to strike that balance to live the excellent life. Also, to live the excellent life for Aristotle, you have to be able to do what you were kind of born to do. This gets picked up more in the medieval kind of Christianity with Aquinas, but you have something that you're supposed to do, and to be excellent you need to rise to that potential. So you have, you're born with a potential in you for Aristotle, later St. Thomas Aquinas, and you need to live a life that actualizes that potential. And I know that sounds kind of new agey in our understanding, but what he means is that you're actually born with this idea, essence of who you are inside of you, and you need to go about your life in order to fulfill those. The problem is, and Aristotle fully recognizes this, is that this is not something you can just will. Like you kind of have to win the lottery to hit your to actually actualize your potential, and Aristotle totally gets this. What I mean by that is, like in our society, just like his, even though he was a Greek in the 300 BCs, we're 2,300 years back. If you weren't a white landowning male, you're not really gonna be able to actualize your potential. Does this make sense? Like there are things in society that are stacked up against us. There are just life circumstances that are stacked up against us. You could be super smart and be born into a place and just not be exposed to anything, right? And it leads you down a path, and you might live a life that you enjoy, but it's not the excellent life. So we have kind of that whole issue of, in the end, you wonder, did I live a good life if I didn't actualize my potential? But the problem is you can't know for Aristotle that you did or did not actualize your potential. Only your friends and family can judge that when you're dead. whether you lived a good life or a bad life, because how you die also factors into whether you lived a life of excellence for Aristotle or not. So what I mean by that is, for Aristotle, I guess, is that to live an excellent life is to die in old age of kind of naturalish causes, nothing crazy. To die poorly is to die young before you do what you're supposed to do, to die stupidly, right? And that is covers a plethora of things, like all of your Darwin awards, all of your like trying to, I don't know, jump into a pool in the hotel from like the 8th story, right? All of that stuff, dying stupid, playing Russian roulette, all that fun stuff, dying stupidly. Another way you could say is dying stupidly is doing that which kind of breaks your potential. Like, I don't know how many of you know the story of the best basketball player probably ever to live, of Len Bias. The great 30 for 30 that ESPN did about him. I think it's Without Bias. He was the best basketball player in America. And he was, I mean, he was going to be better than Michael Jordan or LeBron James ever were. Just absolutely fantastic. He predates them, but just fantastic, amazing. And he got signed #1 by the Boston Celtics. And he goes out and he celebrates and does too many drugs and dies of an overdose. Bad death. He just squandered it all for that night. And he didn't go out thinking that he was going to die that night, but he took those actions which caused his death, which is not preserving the self, which is one of the things Aristotle says living a good life is self-preservation and working towards self-preservation. So the fact that he overdosed means he died a bad death. This makes sense. I hope at this point you're following this kind of, you need to actualize your potential, but to actualize your potential, like everything has to line up. And even if you just driving home one day and someone hits you and you're doing everything right and you die in your car, that could be a bad death for Aristotle. And you could be judged by your family and friends as not living up to your potential. So that's one vision of a good life. And that's one version of what living a moral life looks like. This version that kind of starts with Aristotle goes through a lot of the medieval era, would be called virtue ethics. This idea that ethics are a virtue, a habit. Right? We talked about this with we had Jamie Smith talk about this with Augustine, with you are what you love, even if you don't know what you love. As you develop these habits, that shapes your life, that shows what you truly believe, and that is what is good and right, is how you live your life, what you do. Another big kind of grouping of ethical theories would be utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is the idea that you live your life to maximize the most pleasure for the most people while minimizing pain for the most amount of people. So you try to live so that more people have pleasure, less people have displeasure. And so you can kind of do things in one circumstance where it's right because it helps more people than hurts people, but there's other circumstances where it can harm more people than it helps. And if it harms more people than it helps, it's not the right thing to do. And so utilitarianism would say, don't do that, don't enact that policy, don't work that way because it hurts people. It hurts too many people. And I want you to key on this, that utilitarianism says hurts the least amount of people. Everything's going to hurt people in kind of the utilitarian view. You can't please everyone. You can't win all the time. You will always hurt someone. So you need to like judge who is getting hurt the least. The British philosopher Jeremy Bentham tried to come up with a calculus, an equation, a formula to figure this out, so that every time you act, you need to do kind of this mathematical problem to see if you can act this way. Now, Bentham more meant it for governments for enacting laws, but it kind of trickles down into the idea of a personal guideline. But it's this idea that, like, I need to figure out, all right, if I do this, how many people does it hurt and how many people does it help? Right? And it could be small or it could be large, right? I mean, you kind of see the like, you could feed a family for the price of a cup of coffee. Utilitarianism would say to be a good person, you would give up your cup of coffee, hurt yourself for the family because that's more people and that's probably more pleasure. And you're not, I mean, you're depriving yourself, so there's a little bit of harm, but it's not like a big harm. Because that's what you also have to figure out. There's small pleasures, there's large pleasures, there's small harms, and there's large harms. So you have to also figure that out. What am I doing that harms the least amount of people in the least amount of way? And how do we weigh that? How do we understand? Because different people, different things will be more or less pleasurable to them, more or less harmful to them. But you need to be constantly figuring this out as you interact with people throughout the day, as you do things. As you're driving home, do you let that car out? Well, no, because there's no one behind them, but there's a bunch of people behind you, and you have the green light. So you don't let that car in because you would hurt more people than help, right? You have to kind of figure out all the time this little bit of, am I helping people? Am I not helping people? What am I doing? So that's utilitarianism in a quick nutshell. The third kind of big ethical understanding, at least in kind of Western, North Atlantic, European, American situation, is deontology, Immanuel Kant. So he came up with this idea that to live a good ethical life, you need to act according to a maxim, which can always be true. Things are ethical if everyone can do them at every time. So Aristotle would say that lying at times is good, even though truthfulness is a virtue. Be truthful, but not too truthful. Utilitarianism would say there's situations where you lie, situations you don't, depending on who it hurts, who it harms, who it helps, who it doesn't help, based on the weighing out of the number of people and the amount of pleasure and pain, the magnitudes of pleasure and pain that are in place. Kant says you can never lie because there are situations where lying is not a virtue. It's not ethical to lie. Um, there's certain circumstances with authorities, with your parents, with your spouse, with those you're in a relationship with, that you shouldn't lie. So if there's situations you can think of that you shouldn't lie, you should never lie. The other thing for Kant is that you need to always respect the autonomy of the other person. Autonomy breaks down into autonomous, which is self-law, self-ruling. So what Kant is saying is that you need to act in a way that everyone can make their own decisions and they are not ruled or governed by other people unless they choose to be. And Kant would say that when you lie, you're manipulating them. You're not giving them all the information. You're not trusting them to go through the process and act according to that maxim, which can be universalized, that everyone can do. So for Kant, you never can lie. Also with Kant, all unethical things are equal. There's no such thing as a small sin or a small moral problem and a large moral problem or a large sin or whatever word you want to use. Everything is equal. Lying is equal to murder, and in more than one way for Kant. They're both unethical, period. Also, lying takes away the autonomy of the other person, which takes away their ability to decide, which takes away their life. That seems a little crazy, but we've kind of seen this with people where we lie to them so much that they aren't themselves. They go down pathways that they never would by themselves. And so they live a life that is not their life, but it's the life that you want them to live, right? We think about like grooming, we think about abusers, stuff like that. But we also see it a couple of times. Like I had a friend growing up who wanted to be a singer, and she was always told that she is a great singer. She was going to do wonderful, amazing. She should pursue singing, etc., etc., etc. And so she did. And she got into college and enrolled as a music major and was like, I want to be like a elementary choir teacher. Like, great, sing us something. And it was awful. She can't sing. She's terrible at singing. And she had this deep crisis where she had to like come to this realization that she had been lied to all of her life, that she cannot sing, and that all of her hopes and dreams of what she wanted to do were a lie, because she couldn't do that. She was not living her life. Her life had been taken from her when she was a kid. Her passions, her dreams, what she cultivated was killed. I mean, it was not her. Her other passions and dreams that could have happened were killed when she was lied to. So I hope you kind of see this understanding that when you lie to someone for Kant, you're taking choices out of them. You're taking the ability for them to choose away, so they die, or a part dies. Kant would say they die. Their autonomy dies. But for Kant, you're autonomous. You're so autonomous that you can give up your autonomy to other people. You can allow other people to have influence, to control, to manipulate, to advise you. So you don't have to be outside of relation for Kant. Because if we were all completely autonomous, then no relationship would be possible. because there'd be no compromise. As soon as there is a conflict, the autonomy would clash, each other's autonomy would clash, and they couldn't move. So Kant understands that you have to be able to give up your autonomy, but you have to give up your autonomy in a way that everyone can give up their autonomy. So kind of how do you live a good life then? For Aristotle and the virtue ethics folk, you develop habits, virtues that lead you to living a life of virtue. That's the good life. For the utilitarian, you live a life that is always calculating, maximizing pleasure for everyone while minimizing pain for everyone. And for Kant, you're always trying to act within a way that can be universalized and maintains everyone's autonomy. So there's pitfalls in this. The good life, it's very fragile. It's very hard to attain for Aristotle and the virtue ethicists. You have to be able to develop the habits. You have to have the skills. You have to have the time to develop habits, right? You need to have those privileges, right? We understand that like the quarter pounder with cheese at McDonald's is the has the best calorie to money ratio, price ratio, right? That's why it's easy to be fat, which is not a virtue for Aristotle. It's easy to overconsume calories because calories are cheap. Good calories, filling, nutritious, all of that, that's expensive, right? So you have to have that privilege to have the ability to eat or exercise, right? It's a luxury. It's free time. It's not just having a gym membership or anything. It's having that time, having that energy, having the availability of knowledge for that, right? So that's fraught with issues. With utilitarianism, to live a good life, you always have to be figuring out, is this going to hurt more people than it helps, or helps more people than it hurts? And you can get into kind of that analysis paralysis where you're always calculating, you're always trying to figure it out. Same with Kant, is you can always just have to be thinking, can everyone do this? Can everyone do this? In every circumstance. So Kant's is easier because Kant's answer is basically you can't do anything. I mean, there's very little you can do in every circumstance. You can kind of tell the truth. That's about it. It's very difficult to find that thing that everyone can do in every circumstance. Plus, it makes your life more difficult. So for Kant, when your significant other asks you, do these jeans make me look fat? You can't say, no, they don't, which you can kind of do with, virtue ethics, and you can do with utilitarianism. For Kant, I guess you can say, no, those jeans don't make you look fat, but you have to follow that up with your fat makes you look fat, right? Which is probably more problematic, but more truthful than the other two. I'm not giving you that as life advice. I'm not saying go try that, but you understand what I'm saying here of like, they all have their problems. It's all difficult to live a good life. And I'm just wondering what you think living a good life looks like. And if you find yourself kind of pulled to one of these understandings.